Welcome back to the deep end, everyone. I want you to do me a favor. Take a breath. Unclench your jaw. Maybe dim the lights if you can. We are going somewhere strange tonight. I want you to imagine a late-night campfire conversation. You know, the kind where the fire is dying down to those glowing red embers and the woods around you are getting a little too quiet and the talk turns to the nature of reality itself. That is the vibe we are channeling.
It really is. It's a journey back to 1965 to a living room in Elmira, New York, where two, ordinary people are encountering something absolutely extraordinary. But before we strike the match and get this fire going, we need to handle the housekeeping. This deep dive will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to explore the ideas, to look at the map, not to sell you the territory.
Exactly. And our map for this particular territory is session 141 of the Seth Material. We're looking at the early sessions, book 3. And the date of record is March 17, 1965, 9 o'clock at night. And we have to give a massive, massive shout out to the publisher, the New Awareness Network. I mean, without them preserving these sessions, scanning the notes, keeping this stuff in print, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Absolutely not. And I really can't stress this enough. If what we talk about today sparks that, that little itch in your brain, if you find yourself staring at the ceiling tonight, wondering about the nature of your own mind, you need to go to the source. Don't just take our word for it. Go to sethcenter.com/the early sessions. Buy the books from the New Awareness Network. You have to study the material yourself. It's a dense, rich forest of information.
Because honestly, we are just scratching the surface. But what a surface it is. The mission for this deep dive is, well, it's pretty simple, but also completely mind-bending. We're going to try and answer the question, why aren't we who we think we are?
That's the crux of it, really. We're going to look at telepathy, not as some, Marvel movie superpower, but as a mundane, almost boring reality. We're going to talk about the ego, that little voice in your head you think is you, and why Seth compares it to a dam blocking a wild river. And we're going to talk about the universe pulsing like a giant hand.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this session starts with a ghost story before the ghost or the entity, Seth, even shows up. We are in the pre-session setup. It's a Tuesday evening. That's Robert Butts, Jane Roberts' husband. He's at home. And we need to set the scene here.
Right. Context is absolutely everything. It's 1965. This is critical to remember. No cell phones. There is no Find My Friends app. If someone isn't where they said they would be, you can't just shoot them a text. You are completely in the dark.
So Rob is at his typewriter, working. And Jane decides to walk to the neighborhood store. Simple enough. But then the clock starts ticking. We all know that feeling, the nervous spouse syndrome. She's not back when she said she'd be. 10 minutes pass. 20. Rob is trying to work, but his brain is starting to spin those worst-case scenarios.
Exactly. The anxiety is building up. He's looking at the clock. He's probably pacing. And this is where it gets so fascinating. In the midst of this rising anxiety, Rob does something involuntary. He just picks up a pen. He's not trying to channel. He's not trying to be psychic. He just grabs a scrap of paper and he writes down a specific sentence. Jane is at the Pipers, 6:45 p.m.
But hold on. He just writes it? He doesn't hear a voice or anything?
No voice, nothing like that.
Yeah.
Just a sudden, clarified impulse, a knowing. Now, for context, the Pipers, that's Bob and Mary Piper, they were friends of theirs, but they hadn't seen them in months. Jane hadn't mentioned going there at all. She just went out for groceries. It's a completely random location for her to be, logically speaking.
So if I'm playing the skeptic here, and I think couldn't this just be a lucky guess? I mean, maybe they talked about the Pipers a week ago and it was just buried in his subconscious.
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
Of course. But let's look at the timeline. He writes this note at 6:45 p.m. Jane walks in the door 20 minutes later at 7:05 p.m.
Okay.
And she confirms it. She had passed the Pepper's house on her walk, saw a light on, and just decided on a whim to stop in. She lost track of time. But here's the validation. The smoking gun. Jane admits that while she was there, she was talking about Rob constantly. She was telling Mary Piper, oh, Rob is going to be so worried I need to get back. He's probably pacing around the living room.
So she's projecting this intense worry toward him. She's basically shouting his name in her mind and layering it with anxiety.
Precisely. And he catches it. Not as a voice, not as a vision, but as a piece of data, as a fact. Jane is at the Pipers. What I love about this is how mundane it is. It's not some grand prophecy about the end of the world. It's a husband knowing where his wife is. It suggests that telepathy isn't this mystical high mountain peak experience. It's a utility. It's a natural byproduct of a close emotional bond.
It's practical. It's actually useful.
It is. It's the 1965 version of a text message. But think about the implications of that for a second. If Rod can pick up Jane's thoughts across town just because they're emotionally connected, what does that say about the boundaries between our minds?
It suggests the boundaries are a lot thinner than we think. Or maybe they don't exist at all.
Exactly. And that sets the stage perfectly for the session itself, because when Jane finally goes into trance and Seth comes through, he doesn't just brush this off, he validates it immediately. He uses it as a launching pad to talk about the very nature of identity.
All right, so let's get into the heavy stuff. Seth starts talking about action. Now, I have to be honest, when I hear the word action, I think of a movie explosion or, me running to catch a bus. I think of doing something. But Seth seems to be using it as a noun, like a substance.
He is. This is one of the core pillars of Seth's whole philosophy, and it's a bit tricky to wrap your head around, so let's take it slow. Seth says, and I'm quoting here, identity is a part of action. Consciousness is action that perceives itself.
Action that perceives itself. Okay, I'm going to stop you there because that sounds like philosophical word salad. Action is something I do. How can an action have eyes? How can a verb be self-aware?
It's so counterintuitive, right? But Seth is stripping away the idea that there is a doer behind the deed. We usually think, I am a person, that's the noun, and I am running, that's the verb.
Just so you know.
You are the running. The universe isn't made of things or particles or matter in the way we think of building blocks. It's made of action, energy in motion.
Or verbs, not nouns.
That is a beautiful way to put it. Yes, we are events, we are happenings, we are processes.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
Yeah.
But usually an event happens in time. I run from point A to point B. That takes 5 minutes. But Seth throws a real wrench in the gears regarding time here, doesn't he?
Oh, he does. He says real action has no past or future. It is simultaneous. It's a state of being that is constantly moving, constantly changing, but all at once.
See, that's where I get a headache. Simultaneous action. If everything is happening at once, why do I feel like I'm stuck in Tuesday waiting for Wednesday?
Because of the ego.
The villain enters the story.
Well, not the villain, maybe the other, the overzealous manager. This brings us to the central metaphor of session 141. Seth says, the ego is action's attempt to stand off from itself.
Stand off from itself.
Imagine a rushing wild river. That river is the self. That river is action. It's fluid, it's powerful, it's changing every single millisecond. The water that rushes past you is never the same water. Now imagine, a tiny part of that river tries to stop. It tries to build a little wall, a dam, to create a small reservoir of still water for itself.
The ego is the dam.
The ego is the dam. It wants to stop the flow. It wants to say, I am this, I am safe, I am unchanging, I am Rob, I am Jane, I am a deep dive host.
The ego resents change. Yet change is the only constant in the universe precisely because the universe is action.
That explains so much about the human condition. I mean, we are terrified of change, but we're made of stuff that only changes. It's like we are fighting our own nature from the moment we're born.
It creates a fundamental tension, doesn't it? The ego is like that control freak friend on a road trip who has a laminated itinerary for every 15 minutes. At 10 a.m., we see the monument. At 10:15 a.m., we have a scheduled bathroom break. Meanwhile, the self, the greater part of you, just wants to drive off the map and see what happens. The ego thinks that if it stops controlling the flow, you'll cease to exist. But Seth is saying, no, if you let go of the dam, you become the whole river.
I love that. So the ego isn't bad necessarily, it's just trying way too hard. It's a survival mechanism for physical reality. Seth says, the ego attempts to attain stability and dominance. It seeks to limit certain perceptions. And think about it. If you are constantly aware of the entire river, all of your past lives, all your probable futures, the thoughts of your neighbors, you couldn't function. You couldn't drive a car. You need the dam to create a calm little pool where you can focus on the task of being human.
So the dam is necessary then?
It is. It's absolutely necessary for this experience. But the problem arises when we think the dam is the only reality, when we mistake the little pool for the whole ocean.
Which leads us right into the next big point in this session, the physics of perception. Because usually we think, okay, I have eyes, therefore I see the world.
Right. The standard view is the physical world exists, it's hard and concrete, and we evolved sensory organs to detect it. Structure determines perception.
But Seth just flips the script completely.
Totally. 180 degrees. He argues that perception determines structure. He says, and this is a great quote, generally the type of characteristic perception patterns of a consciousness will determine its physical structure.
Wait a minute. So you're saying I have eyes because my consciousness wanted to see in a certain way, not the other way around.
That's exactly what he's saying. The desire to perceive creates the tool of perception. You aren't a body that happens to have a soul. You are a soul that has built a body to experience a very specific type of reality. And because we are turned into this specific frequency, this physical life, we have these specific physical bodies. But Seth points out that this is a huge limitation. We're only seeing a tiny, tiny slice of the pie.
It's like we are all wearing VR headsets. The headset determines what we see, what we experience, but it also blocks out the rest of the room.
That is a perfect analogy. And Seth says this limitation is actually a focus. He says if we didn't have these limitations, if the dam of the ego wasn't there to some extent, we would just be overwhelmed by endless reality possibilities. We wouldn't be able to hold a conversation because we'd be too distracted by the fourth dimension.
Or what's happening in a galaxy a billion light years away.
Precisely. But the key takeaway here, and this is the really liberating part, is that because our structure is built by our perception, we aren't stuck. If we change how we perceive, we can change our reality. We aren't victims of our bodies, we are the architects of them.
That's incredibly empowering, but also a little daunting.
Responsibility usually is.
So we're about halfway through the session notes here. Seth calls for a break, and this is where things get, I want to say spooky, but maybe visceral is the better word. The whole vibe in the room just changes.
It really does. It becomes chilling. It's 9:25 p.m. Jane snaps out of her trance. Usually she doesn't remember much. She comes back blinking, maybe needing a glass of water. But this time is different. This time she remembers a sensation, a physical feeling that she brought back with her.
She describes a pulsation.
Yes. And at first she tries to rationalize it. She's a practical person. She thinks, is there a truck driving by? Is the floor vibrating from traffic? But she checks, and it's not that. It's internal. It's coming from inside the silence.
And she uses this really specific image to describe it. She says it felt like the rhythmical, not too strenuous opening and closing of a hand.
Let's just pause on that image for a second. The opening and closing of a hand.
It's weirdly biological.
It is. I mean, just imagine that for a moment. The entire universe, or at least the source of energy she is tapping into, isn't a cold, dead void. It's not empty space. It's pulsing, like a heart, or like a giant hand, squeezing and releasing over and over.
It makes the universe feel alive, like literally alive, a giant organism.
It connects right back to what we were saying about action. Action isn't static. It's a rhythmic, living force. And for Jane, feeling that inside her own body must have been just profound. It dissolves the barrier between me and it. If the universe is pulsing and I am pulsing, we are the same thing.
It really creates that late-night atmosphere we promised, just sitting there, feeling the pulse of reality. Thump, thump.
It's a reminder that all the intellectual stuff, the theories about ego and action, they aren't just words. They are descriptions of a living experience. This isn't a textbook. It's a biology report of the soul.
So Jane goes back into trance. She shakes off that hand sensation. And Seth decides to do a little victory lap.
He really does. He can be quite chicky. Seth isn't some dry professor. He has a distinct personality.
He brings up the fifth dimension. Now, apparently, he had mentioned a structure way back in session 12, which was over a year prior to this.
Right, January 1964. At the time, he just dropped a hint about a structure in the fifth dimension, but said he couldn't fully explain it because Rob and Jane didn't have the vocabulary yet. They were just too new to all this. But now, in session 141, he connects the dots. And Jane even notes that Seth seemed smug or pleased with himself.
I love that visual. A disembodied entity looking smug. Like, see, I told you so. I had a plan all along.
Exactly. But the point he's making is about the Gestalt self. Now, Gestalt is a German word. It basically means a unified whole that is more than the sum of its parts. Seth explains that consciousness is a gestalt of perception patterns.
And this leads to a paradox that kind of broke my brain when I was reading the notes.
The paradox of the changing self.
Yeah. He says, and I want to get this right because it's so slippery, it is no longer the same consciousness, yet it is the same consciousness, because it is that which has extended itself.
It's the ship of Theseus problem, but for the soul.
Okay, break that down for me.
Okay. Imagine a big corporation, let's say Google. Google in 1998 is a couple of guys in a garage. Google today is a global empire. Different employees, different buildings, different products. It's completely changed, but it's still Google.
Yeah.
The entity has changed, yet it remains itself.
Okay, that makes sense.
Seth is saying your soul is the corporation.
Yeah.
The you, sitting here right now, the host of this deep dive, is just one temporary employee. You are working a very specific shift. You are the ego. But the corporation, the gestalt, keeps growing and changing based on what all the employees do.
So the me that started this sentence is technically dead because I've changed since I started speaking.
In a way, yeah. But also, no, because the continuity is the self. The act of changing is what makes you you. If you stop changing, you would stop existing.
So can I use this as an excuse? Honey, I know I promised to do the dishes, but that was the old me. The new me has evolved past such domestic drudgery.
Laughs. You can try. But if your spouse has telepathy like Rob and Jane, they might just see right through that. They might say, well, the new you is sleeping on the couch tonight.
Fair point. But seriously, this idea that we are so fluid, it's terrifying to the ego, isn't it?
Terrifying. Remember, the ego is the dam. It wants the water to stay still. It wants you to be the same person you were in high school or the same person you were yesterday, because that's predictable. Predictability feels safe. But the self, the river, knows that growth requires the death of the old self. You have to change to exist. Stagnation is the only true death in Seth's universe.
That is profound. And then, as if that wasn't enough to chew on, Seth drops an absolute bomb about our sleep life.
Yes. The dream ego.
This is segment 6 in our outline, but it feels like it could be its own entire series. We tend to think of sleep as just turning off, like powering down a computer. I close my eyes, the world goes away, I wake up 8 hours later.
But Seth says we are doing the complete opposite. He says we must move away from the concept of a self as indivisible, rigid, and limited. He then reveals that a single self can have more than one ego operating simultaneously.
So when I'm asleep, I'm not just a passive observer of weird movies in my head. I'm not just watching a screensaver.
Not at all. There is a directive part of the self within the dream world, a dream ego. It has its own purpose, its own memory, its own agenda. It's like a shift change at a factory. The waking ego clocks out, and the dream ego clocks in.
That is just wild. It implies I have a second life I barely remember.
You do. And that dream ego is just as real and directed as your waking ego. It solves problems, it constructs scenarios, it communicates with other entities. You are living a double life.
Seth uses a really striking image here to describe it. He says the entity, the whole self, has egos like many faces looking outward in all directions.
Yes. Imagine a sphere floating in space, and all over the surface of that sphere are faces. One face looks at physical reality. That's you right now hosting this show. Another face looks into the dream world. Another might look into a past life or a probable reality. They are all you, but they are looking in different directions.
It makes you feel huge, like expansive.
And that's the goal, to break down the walls of the little box the ego has built for us. The ego says, I am this small, fragile thing. Seth says, no, you are a multidimensional sphere of consciousness with faces looking into eternity.
So we've had the telepathy, the ego's dam, the pulsing universe, the fluid self, and the dream boss. Seth covers a lot of ground in 1 hour.
He really does. It's an avalanche of insight.
And then we get to the end of the session. It's 10:37 p.m. The energy is winding down. The fire is burning low. But Seth doesn't just say goodnight.
No. This is one of the most touching moments in the early sessions, I think. Usually, Seth dictates words. He's a teacher. But here, Jane receives what she calls a strong emotional projection. It's a feeling tone, not just data. It's warmth.
What was the message?
Jane translates it as, through action, see how I'm a part of you both now, and how foolish it is of you to worry about identities when all identities are so bound together.
How foolish it is to worry.
It's a warm, almost parental reassurance. Think about it. Rob and Jane are pioneers here. They are terrified. They're worried about who is Seth, who is Rob, who is Jane, where does one end and the other begin? Are they losing their minds? And Seth is saying, look, we are all part of the same fabric. The distinctions you're worrying about, the dams you are building, they don't exist in the deeper reality. Relax, we're together.
It dissolves this separation. It's not ghost versus human anymore. It's just connection.
And for Rob and Jane, living in this strange new reality where the wife is speaking in a deep voice and the husband is taking notes, that reassurance must have been incredibly comforting. They aren't going crazy. They are just waking up.
So what does this all mean for us, for the listener driving to work or folding laundry or sitting by that imaginary campfire? We've talked about dams and rivers and pulses. But how do I take this into my Tuesday?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it asks us to reevaluate our anxiety. Rob's anxiety about Jane being late was real, but it was unnecessary because they were already connected. Our anxiety about change, about death, about identities, Seth suggests it's all just the ego trying to hold back the river.
The dam trying to stop the water.
Exactly. And the water is going to flow anyway. You are going to change. You are going to dream. You are going to evolve. So the invitation is to stop fighting the current, to trust that the self knows where it's going, even if the ego doesn't have the map.
That is a beautiful place to land.
It is.
Now, before we let you go, we have to remind you, this was just a glimpse. Session 141 is packed with nuance we couldn't even touch on. There are pages of notes on the specific mechanics of how the inner senses work that we just had to skip over for time.
Please, if this resonated with you at all, go to sethcenter.com, the early sessions. Support the New Awareness Network.
These books are dense, yes, but they're also incredibly rewarding. They're like a gym for your mind. You will read a sentence, stare at the wall for 10 minutes, and then your whole world will look different.
And remember, this deep dive is just a guide. You have to take the hike yourself.
Absolutely.
So here is the final thought we want to leave you with tonight. We talked about the ego being a dam, a structure built to stop the flow of your life to create a sense of control.
Right.
My question to you is this. If your ego is just a dam, what would happen if you just let go? If you open the floodgates? Who would you be then?
That's the question.
Think about it. Sleep on it. Maybe ask your dream ego what they think. Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you in the next Deep Dive.